All right, so today we are going to talk about if a function is an actual function or not, and then interpreting. So for the front side here, you have to use a straight up and down line, and if it touches once, then it is a function, and if it touches more, then it's not a function. So we're going to look at 3, 6, and 9. So let's start with number 3. So I have a straight up and down line. I'm going to use a ruler this time. And look, here it's just touching once, it's just touching once, and I mean that function's only passing through this up and down line one time, one time, one time, one time, still just one time, one time, one time. Okay, so it was once the whole time, so that means it is a function. Now let's look at the next one. So we have this triangle type of shaped function, so I'm going to go through, and look, it's touching more than one time. This up and down line is touching more than once. Here, we got touching here and here. This next piece, we have that we're touching here and here, and this next piece, we're touching here and here. So it's touching more than once, so it is not a function. Okay, so if you want to draw a straight up and down line, it's touching more than once. That's a no, no, no. Okay, next up we have this dots, and it looks like a heart. How lovely. So here, look, straight up and down line. We don't even have to go any further. It's touching that straight up and down line twice, so it is not a function. Now let's talk about interpreting. So we are going to talk about scuba diving in Lake Michigan. So this is your depth in feet, so this is how deep underwater you are. And then at the bottom here on the x-axis, we have time in minutes. So we got our y is about feet, our x-axis is about time in minutes. So it's asking me, what does the y-intercept mean for this function? Well, I remember that my y-intercept happens on the y-axis. Okay, so that's what this big red dot is. At time 0, we're 5 feet deep. You can say at time 0 minutes, you're 5 feet deep, or you just start 5 feet deep. All right, so then it says, what does the maximum mean for this function? So looking at my graph here, I have a maximum way up top right there. And let's see, it's 13 minutes and 40 feet. Ooh, sorry, that kind of squiggled. So I could say something like, the deepest is 40 feet at 13 minutes, right? Because you got to kind of talk about both the time that is part of the graph and then like what the depth means, okay? When does the depth increase the fastest? So this is when it has, so when does it go up really fast? Well, it looks like it's kind of going up the whole time, but when does it kind of like skyrocket straight up? So looking at this, it kind of skyrockets straight up during this time right here. So it asks us when. So this is talking about time. So we can say between 6 and 9 minutes, because right here at 6 minutes, we see it go whoop, and then it stops going that fast at 9 minutes. Okay, we have another when question. So this is talking about time. So when does the depth increase the slowest? So this is when it goes up slow. Okay, so we're getting deeper, kind of slowly getting deeper. This is where we go really fast, and then we have another one where we're going a little bit slower. So I'm gonna actually say right here, see how it almost looks flat right here? I'm gonna say that this time is the slowest because you're going up, but just barely. So the time between that is 1 and 6 minutes. So between 1 and 6 minutes. Okay, the next question is the depth is always decreasing, true or false, and why? So looking at our graph here, does it ever go down as we go from left to right? No. So we can say something like it's false because they keep getting deeper into the water. You can also talk about the graph. There's a couple of ways to answer this. You can say the graph is always going up from left to right. So that's another way to say this. So let's look at letter F. What does domain mean? So domain is about the x-axis. So it's talking about this whole graph on the x-axis. So our domain starts at time 0 and goes to 13. So what does domain mean in this? We could say, you could say a couple of things. One thing you could say is that she's diving, or whoever it is diving for 13 minutes, right? Because they start at time 0 and they go all the way up to 13 while they're diving. That's one way you could talk about domain, but it has to be about time, right? Because our x-axis is about time. Okay, so if they ask you what does domain mean, look at what that x-axis is talking about and then write about what that means. Like, for example, I said diving for 13 minutes. I talked about the time. Okay, next up we have range. All right, so range is the y-axis, and our y-axis is talking about depth. So our y-axis, it starts here with that original red dot that we talked about for the y-intercept, and it goes all the way up here. You could say it has to be talking about depth, so we can say that she dove, or whoever it was, we could say they dove between 5 and 40 feet, right? Because our range goes from this 5 all the way up to this 40, because range is about the y-axis. All right, so that's a possible answer. There are a couple of ways to talk about all of these problems, but it has to make sense in context of the question. So make sure when you're talking about the y-intercept, you talk about how it's time 0 and at that 5. If it's talking about maximum, okay, you got to give both pieces. If it says when, give me the time. If it says domain, look at what your domain means. If it says range, look at what your range means, okay? All right, the other problems we will do together in class.